For a short while, one year during my summer holidays, I thought only people I did not know died. During the time I thought this, we were living far out on Fort Road on the island of Antigua. We had only 2 neighbours, Mistress Maynard and her husband. That summer we had a pig that had just had piglets, some guinea fowl, and some ducks that laid enormous eggs that my mother said were big even for ducks. I hated to eat any food except for the enormous duck eggs, hard-boiled. I had nothing to do every day except to feed the birds and the pig in the morning and in the evening. I spoke to no one other than my parents, and sometimes to Mistress Maynard if I saw her when I went to pick up the peelings of vegetables which my mother had asked her to save for the pig, which was just the thing the pig really liked. From our yard I could see the cemetery. I did not know it was the cemetery until one day when I said to my mother that sometimes in the evening, while feeding the pig, I could see various small stick-like figures, some dressed in black, some dressed in white, bobbing up and down in the distance. I noticed, too, that sometimes the black and white stick-like figures appeared in the morning. My mother said that it was probably a child being buried, since children were always buried in the morning. Until then, I had not known that children died. I was afraid of the dead, as was everyone I knew. We were afraid of the dead because we never could tell when they might show up again. Sometimes they showed up in a dream, but that wasn't so bad because they usually only brought a warning. And in any case, you wake up from a dream. But sometimes they would show up standing under a tree, just as you were passing by. Then they might follow you home. And even though they might not be able to come into your house, they might wait for you and follow you wherever you went. In that case, they would never give up until you joined them. My mother knew of many people who had died in such a way. My mother knew of many people who had died, including her own brother. After I found out about the cemetery, I would stand in my yard and wait for a funeral to come. Some days, there were no funerals. No one died, I would say to my mother. Some days, just as I was about to give up and go inside, I would see the small specks appear. What made them so late? I would ask my mother. Probably someone couldn't bear to see the coffin lid put in place, and so, as a favour, the undertaker might let things go on too long, she said. One day, a girl my own age died. I did not know her name or anything personal about her except that she was my own age and that she had a humpback. She attended another school, and on the day of her funeral, her whole school got the day off. At my school, it was all we could talk about. Did you know the humpbacked girl? I remembered once standing behind her in a line to take out books at the library. Then I saw a fly land on the collar of her uniform and walk up and down as the collar lay flat on her hump. On hearing that she was dead, I wished I had tapped the hump to see if it was hollow. I also remember that her hair was parted into 4 plaits and that the parts were crooked. She must have combed her hair herself, I said. At last, though, someone I knew was dead. The day of her funeral, I bolted from school as soon as we finished the last amen of our evening prayers, and I made my way to the funeral home. When I got there, the whole street was full of girls from her school, all in their white dress uniforms. It was a big crowd of them, and they were just milling around, talking to each other quietly and looking very important. I didn't have time to stop and really envy them. I made my way to the door and entered the funeral parlour. There she was. She was lying in the regular pitch pine varnished coffin on a bed of mauve and white lilacs. She wore a white dress, and it may have come all the way down to her ankles, but I didn't have time to look carefully. It was her face that I wanted to see. I remembered how she had looked the day in the library. Her face was just a plain face. She had black eyes, flat nostrils, broad lips. Lying there dead, she looked just the same, except her eyes were closed and she was so still. I once had heard someone say about another dead person that it was as if the dead person were asleep. But I had seen a person asleep, and this girl did not look asleep. I stared at her a long time, long enough so that I caused the line of people waiting to stop by the coffin to grow long and on the verge of impatience. Of course, as I stared, I kept my fingers curled up tight against my palms because I didn't want to make a mistake and point and then have them rot and drop off right there. I then went and sat among the mourners. Her family smiled at me, thinking, I am sure, that I was a school friend, even though I wore the uniform of another school. We sang a hymn, All Things Bright and Beautiful, and her mother said it was the first hymn the humpbacked girl had learned to sing by heart. I walked home. By then I was very late getting home from school, but I was too excited to worry about it. I wondered if one day, while going somewhere alone, I would see the humpbacked girl standing under a tree, and if she would try to get me to go for a swim or eat a piece of fruit. And the next thing my mother would know, she would be asking my father to make a coffin for me.